Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil YouTube episode. Today we've got FAQ 7 for season 6. And just like normal, Dean has selected questions from all of our YouTube videos that are recent, put them into one document for me, and the guys print it out, put it on my desk. So I've got it here. I've not read any of these questions. We're just gonna go from the top and see if I can help to the best of my ability. Therefore, answering the question for everybody instead of just in writing down below. So as per usual, let's jump in and get started. First question is Spano. Spano says, how can I translate the BuildASoil schedule to autos? It seems I always have a wrong step. I develop yellow tips and flowering. I run in a 4x4 with Niwa Grow Hub and AC Infinity and all. This is one of those scenarios where sometimes the problems that we have in the grow hurt the grower more than the plants. And some plants just yellow, like for instance, in our 4x4 right now, we're hand watering. We've got Halcyon, feminized seeds from Orchid, not Autoflower, but one of them is fading some of the most beautiful colors on the leaves, where the more halitosis leaning one is just getting yellower on the leaves. And so the difference in senescence can sometimes lead us to believe maybe we're doing something wrong. And I've noticed a lot of the autoflowers will get little bits of that while they're fading, depending on the genetic background. So less is more when it comes to some of those. You don't want to overfeed. And so I would say keep it very, very simple and do a larger volume of soil like the earth box or something where you have enough where you don't have to really feed and worry about that and you get really good results. I've got an autoflower to the right of me in a 3x3 that's being automatically watered through an Oya, and I've not fed it at all. There's not one burnt tip, and the thing is developing perfect structure, just water only. And so with autos, I would say less is more. And I'd say with a lot of the landrace varieties, I noticed less is more. They don't seem to be as hungry feeding as some of these others. So just something that I've noticed. I hope that helps you. As far as the schedule goes, the schedules were created to help show people when they might want to use products. But as far as the BuildASoil Classic, when you have like an earth box or an auto pot and an autoflower that's not going to get, bigger than the container, you can really let it go water only or do very, very light feedings in like a half dose to see how the plants respond. And I think you'll get really good results. So next question, HQ Chef. Hi, my question is, do plants have to fade for them to be ready? I'm on day 68, haven't seen a fade yet. From all the info I got, she's an 8 to 9 week. Your help on this would be appreciated. It depends. So senescence looks different on different plants. I just mentioned one that was fading to yellow, where there's others that are fading to like a burgundy color. And there is usually a transition in color. Typically, they're not always the same color green all of the way through. And so I would encourage you to go a bit longer to see if there's any change in color. I will say though, some plants just hold on to a darker color the whole time and don't fade as much, and that's its natural style. Plants don't have to be faded and starving to be good. Some people seem to think it's better that way. I've noticed that some plants may be better that way, but it doesn't seem to correlate across the board, as I've had some plants in the same bed completely faded next to ones that don't. And it tells me it's not a difference in nutrition, it's a difference in the genetics. And either way, with a good, proper, slow dry, get really good finished product. And so don't be too hard on yourself. I think that while it's important to take note of and learn from genetic to genetic, not all of them are gonna fade out completely yellow and crispy leaves. When I do a water only run and I've overshot the container, a lot of times I look at it as a negative sign when I see that aggressive fade. This season in the 10x10, you'll see I'm about to do the next video where we're gonna be harvesting slightly early on some of the tent and going through what happens when you just overgrow on a water only, bypassing or overshooting the size of the container, and you get an aggressive fade. And while I don't mind it, I don't think it ruins the herb, I don't think it makes it better. I think it just makes it harder for the next round to get things right, and harder to keep things super healthy in the sense that when I get it right, I can let the plants fully tell me when to harvest. Where right now, what I'm seeing is premature senescence due to lack of nutrition from some of the overshooting of the container size and my desire not to feed them. So I think I left a little on the table this run, despite how big it is. So EK, what causes foxtailing? Is it genetics, too much light, too much nitrogen and bloom? I'm growing a Jack cross, and I remember the Jack Hare always has those foxtail buds in the past. Thanks for all you do. There's a number of different reasons this can happen. When I look at what I would call like a positive foxtailing, where you see a nice narrow leaf, more sativa leaning, if you will, start to have these like finger-like buds that just stack on top of each other. And I think it's beautiful and I love seeing it. Maybe a pain to trim sometimes, but some of the structures you get on some of those more narrow leaf plants really is a foxtail-y type of structure. The other thing that's good is like when you're washing for hash, having that open foxtail instead of rock hard dense gives you more surface area for trichomes instead of just the outer surface. And so I like it for that reason. But when you have a plant that's uniform and maybe the center is slightly higher and it's going too close to the light and you see it foxtail differently than the other buds, you know it's from too much light. And if you have a grow going pretty well and it may be foxtailing just slightly, it's got this natural expression and you like feed it for whatever reason extra hard, you'll notice it kind of re-spurts some growth and can kind of cause some foxtailing. But typically when I see it and it's a real healthy grow, it's just the genetics that I'm seeing. Otherwise, for sure, you can cause it by some of the other methods that you mentioned, but that just means foxtailing is not always bad. When you hear like foxtailing in the classic sense, to me it does mean overfed, over light, over everything, and it's like larvae stretching foxtailing, burnt, not like really good tight structure of stacked beautiful flowers. So there's definitely a difference, and that's part of why it's not an exact answer. Lootbird, what else can I use if I don't have the mushroom straw? The mushroom straw does not need to be used. Much like many of our products, the most important part of this is just recognizing the mulch layer. Having something on top of your soil that blocks the direct light and allows you to leverage all of that top portion of fertility. So when you're top dressing, it's likely to break down and the roots can dig in and you get that entire layer there where the worms go and everything. To keep that nice and moist and protected, we use a mulch layer. Oftentimes you can grow your own. You can grow some cover crop, chop and drop, now you've got mulch. You can buy straw. Instead of the oyster log straw, which is where it's inoculated with mycelium first, you don't need that. It's just kind of cool to have some extra fungus and to add that, but it's probably not necessary at all. And the other reason why we like it is it's like been boiled and there's not seeds gonna germinate and it's all chopped up. So it's kind of nice, but really it's not needed. You could use bark, you could use straw. One of the things, I think one of the reasons why we sell straw is we buy organic straw. And locally, if you just go like, if you're in an agricultural area and you just go buy like seed-free, weed-free straw, a lot of times it's been sprayed with Roundup or something. So customers buy it for that purpose, but you don't have to even use straw. Something to cover it. Like if you see the earth box, we just use the black plastic cover. So many ways to do this. Ruth Stout in her No Work Gardening book really like helped me get over the fact that it's not one particular material. She uses straw like 8 inches thick in her vegetable garden, but she would use anything for mulch and she talks about that. And so that's really the thing. Get something to cover it and something that doesn't cause a problem like bringing in pesticides or whatever. Bark may rob a little nitrogen, but not when it's on top. It's only when you mix it in. Same with straw. So the idea with straw, if you had the choice, was that when you grow the cover crop and you chop and drop it, those greens mix with the browns of the straw and starts to build like a carbon to nitrogen ratio that mimics a soil as it composts right on top of your pile there. So that was the idea. JN says, thank you so much for all you do. I've got a question. I'm a hunter and each year, if I'm lucky, I have access to many pounds of organic free-range elk and deer bones. Is there a way I could make my own bone meal out of these bones? Absolutely, I'm sure there's a way. This is not my area of expertise, but I want to say that's awesome because if you're hunting, not only are you providing really, really good meat for yourself, elk is phenomenal for you, but then to want to use all the animal really like drives it home for me. I've tried lots of diets from vegan and plant-based and all the way over to full carnivore and just whole foods and keto, and I've tried lots of things. It's fun to see how I feel and try them, just like in the grow room. And part of that's the discipline side, but I know that there's a burden and a cost to these shrink-wrapped meat. And so to go all the way and go hunting, it's something I'm fascinated by. I just got a new bow and I'm learning, haven't been hunting yet, but I still have no idea what I'd do with the bones. I do know that there's plenty of information out there about how to probably either steam or boil or process your own bones and then break them down. So I would just literally be Googling it to try and teach you. So instead of me trying to teach, I would just say, good luck, Google it. There's gotta be a freaking way. I know that it's a traditional thing for farmers to do. Maybe I'll look into it after this. Maybe we'll learn something together. Thank you for asking the question. Rob, I've noticed something interesting in my tent. Every day, about 30 minutes before lights out, the humidity drops about 10%. I'm at the end of week 7 of flower. Is that just the plants knowing the day is ending and stopping transpiration? I have the exhaust and dehumidifier run wide open all day just to keep it below 65%. But like clockwork, every day the humidity drops to about 55% or less every single day before lights out. Maybe I've hit the DLI for the day and they just stop transpiring and releasing moisture. That's the only reason I can think of. Nothing really changes in the lung room either. Man, that's a really fascinating question. I don't know. It's totally possible that there is some predictive action going on and they're like, hey, we're done. That's about the right amount of light, and they stop transpiring. But I honestly don't know. It could be that there's some heat on that side of the house at the same time each day and that causes a difference. But if you're saying the lung room isn't changing much and the humidity is dropping, then it has to be from what's going on inside unless it's happening in the lung room, right? So sometimes heat and some of those differences can cause like pressures that cause changes. Maybe you get home the same time and you like open up a window in the house, or maybe something changes. Otherwise, if you can really isolate all of that and it is just changing in the grow room, it would make a ton of sense for me, because like I notice when I'm doing automatic irrigation and you can watch how much they drink, as you get later in flower, there's a time where it kind of just slows down. Plants have these like circadian rhythms, and it's totally possible that you're seeing something based on it having a certain time frame where it's like, I'm done. I've hit the DLI, or I know the dark's coming soon and I'm tapping out. But I honestly don't know. And it's more fascinating than it is anything to me. And I'd love to talk more about this. Any other growers that have noticed this, please share with us. Otherwise, I personally haven't noticed something like this. Rob, thanks for asking this, or I should say sharing it, and I don't have an answer. Stony Farms, addressing par. If you have a top grow above everything else, when is too much par for non-CO2? Do you go off that main top or the majority of what the plant's getting? Thank you. That's a good question. So what he's saying is, if you have a light, it's obviously stronger under the light than it is to the sides. But when it comes to me to make decisions, I just look at the weakest link. So when I'm looking at my grow room and I'm looking at par, I kind of go off the average. Like if most of it is in that 800 range, that's what I'm gonna call it. Even if one top is taller and is at 1200, I based it on the weakest link. So if I'm worried about frying that one top versus all the others getting too little light, I'll dim the whole thing. Or if I'm like, you know what, that top is not too close, it's fine, I kind of leave it cranked up for the rest of it. So just focus on your weakest link, don't overthink it, and try and be in that target range. The more even you get your canopy, the easier it is. But I would say with the PPFD, I've learned that less is more. You don't have to be high PPFD. So maybe take that into consideration, and if some of your tops really are getting high 1400 ppfd, you can lower it. So there's say 1,000 and the rest is at 600-700. That's below it, and that's more than enough. A lot of times around the perimeter, I'll be like at 100 or 200 and still stacking really good nugs because the main part of the plant is still receiving plenty of light. So just remember that it's not just about exactly where it hits. The plant can move energy around. That is a good question though. Okay. Microbe feeder. Jeremy, great freaking grow, man. Thank you. Those plants are incredible. You said you don't grow this way in the video, but smaller and more plants. Why not do a small grow in a smaller tent? Maybe a 4x2 tent. I want to see you grow that way instead of these massive beasts. I have no need to grow this much. I want quality nugs and a variety. Quantity isn't an issue. Cheers. We're doing a smaller grow. We're doing the 4x4 grow right now with 4 15 gallons, and that's a lot closer how I would normally grow at home. And it's doing phenomenal, by the way. And so we'll show you some photos of that as you watch the 10x10 series and how it finishes out. But the size of those plants is a lot more mimicking of the size of the container. And of course, if one wanted to, you had some new seeds to pop, you could definitely put more than just 4 in that space. I do plan on doing something like that. I will just lower the number of quadrants that we grow, increase the plant count, and show what you can do. But we're trying to plan season 7 right now. So maybe that's a good time to talk about it. I have talked to Low Temp. We used to carry their presses. I use a Low Temp. Long story, but we have a great customer and friend that is a good hash washer and lost their house in a fire. Low Temp hooked him up. It's just been part of this whole like circle. And then I was gonna grow maybe one of his hash cuts so we know the known wash percentage. And Low Temp reached out and was like, yo, why don't we wash like a whole 10x10 series run and document it and do a YouTube video using the mini Osprey? And I was like, God, that would be epic. But that might mean that I need to fill up more of the tent instead of just one quadrant with a higher density for next season. So we'll do an episode discussing or asking questions about what we should do for season 7. But high on my list is showing the higher plant count, you know, very short veg time style, because it's what I prefer. And I think if you're not worried about plant numbers or you just have a small area, being in flower all the time is more productive than being in veg for a long time. And it is much easier to manage the health of the plants, the height, and all that stuff. So thank you for commenting, and I definitely plan on doing that in the future. Maybe we'll even do a smaller tent, but I like the 4x4, and I would really like to show a higher plant count in the 10x10 so I can show what it does. Justin, When drying my past harvests, I've used exhaust fan to control humidity levels and floor air conditioning for temps, but always lose the bulk of the nose they put off at harvest. Is running the exhaust fan that much of an issue? Interesting. So what you're saying is you've used exhaust fan to control humidity. Yeah, I think that's fine, meaning when you load up your tent, at least where I'm at, it's dry enough where when I load up my tent, it's about perfect humidity. So I'm not exhausting much, but there's some people that do like to keep as much of the air in as possible. And so a slightly bigger drying space might be helpful, but it's not always an exact answer. It's about the weakest link. And so if you're exhausting all the time just to keep up with humidity, that might be increasing that airflow, which may be speeding up your drying time. But I use an exhaust too. And typically my exhaust barely fires because it's more a problem here in Colorado that after day 2 or 3, it's dropping well below the percentage of humidity, so it's never exhausting. And so, you know what I would do like at home before I did any automation is I would have a small fan on the floor exhausting out, and I would unzip my tent. And then what would happen is it started to get below 65%. I would then switch the fan to blowing around inside the tent and zip it closed and never needed to exhaust again. The other thing is if you're using a humidifier and adding humidity and you have your humidifier running too often, it'll cause lots of exhausting. But it sounds like you're in the opposite situation. You're using an air conditioner to control that. So I would just say that prolonging it is the best answer to keep the nose, in my opinion, and obviously the lower temp. So I feel like you're doing everything you can. One of the things that you didn't mention is how long it typically takes to dry. If when you're using a little exhaust and the AC, you're able to extend it to 14, 15, 16, 17 days before you're getting that stem snap, you should be preserving most of that odor, and it could just be a genetic condition. Sometimes genetics, you know, certain ones, they have it, they keep it, it's part of like that final smoke report, and some hold on to it as well, either in short term or long term. And so each flower that you decide to really keep around, each cut, you'll learn a little bit more about how to store it and process it and when to harvest it and all those things, but it's not an exact process for me. Make sure you're getting that long, slow dry time and cool temps, and that's the way to maximize that nose. Okay, next question, Fletty. Fletty says, can you dry in 40 to 45 degree weather? I don't see why not. I've definitely dried from outdoor, you know, and hung it in a trailer when it wasn't ideal and it got a little bit cold, but it might slow it down a bit. You know, like if you're gonna be dehydrating food, typically you wanna add a little bit of heat when you do it. And so it's probably part of that process of like conditioning the moisture to release. It may extend the time out a little bit, but it's gonna slow microbial growth. But I totally think you absolutely could dry in 40 to 45 degree weather. All right, next question, why stop? I have pretty hard water that's around total 400 ppm. Will the pH of the soil rise over time? If so, could I use RO or supplement more CalMag into the soil or water? Thanks and much love for the fam. That's a great question. I don't have enough information to properly answer it. What I mean by that is, if you were to send off for a soil test and determine what the 400 ppm were, it would be helpful. If it's sodium, yeah, it's gonna jack your soil. If it's magnesium, it's gonna raise the pH over time, and you don't wanna add more mag. If it's bicarbonate and you have a big enough soil buffer, it may not really be an issue. Maybe acidifying it could actually fix it, and it neutralizes that acid and it doesn't combine and cause problems. But I wonder, 400 ppm, no matter who you are or where it's coming from, like if it's from a well, I'd probably be a little more concerned. Tap water, probably be okay. I would just filter it. But if you know what the 400 ppm is, if you have a water test like from Logan Labs, or worst case, maybe even Google your local like municipality where you get the water, see if they have a recent water test, and let's see what's making up that number, and then you can better answer this question, probably for yourself right away. It's not always just calcium and magnesium. So good question. I hope that steers other people into looking to actually identify what's in their water. JC says, hey Jeremy, love the series. I know you use glass to cure. Have you ever used a vacuum sealer with your mason jars? I've had great success with this and want to know if you've tried it or not, if I'm just tripping. It's a good idea. Lately, I've been using the freeze dryer bags a little more because we offer a freeze dry bag. I'm sorry, a vacuum seal bag. And what I've been doing is like taking all my meat for the freezer, and I took those packs that they gave it to me in and I put it inside the really thick mill vacuum seal bag, and then I put that into the freezer. And it makes sense. If I'm gonna tuck it away for a while, I really want it to be preserved and stay away from oxygen. I feel like the jars probably do a good enough job sealing. But like if you put a jar that's sealed and you took that and put it in a bag, I definitely don't see how it could hurt anything at all. In fact, it's just gonna stop oxygen from getting through any of the jar seal and really preserve it for a long time. Another factor is it may block it from light where the glass is clear. I put mine in a tub, all my jars, but usually for me it's like temperature. So like if I have a tub and it's full of jars and it's all fully trimmed and everything, it's like, do I keep the whole tub of jars in my bedroom, or do I put it in the kitchen, or it's a big thing of jars? Do I put it in the garage where the heat fluctuates? So ideally I'd have like a fridge or something just for the jars, and I could monitor the temperature. That'd be pretty cool. I know Canatrol makes something, right? But it's so small in comparison to like what I would want to do. So yeah, I don't really know. I've not done it. So hopefully that answers your question, but I don't think you're just tripping. I think obviously when we put a lot of work into something, we want to preserve it. And that makes a ton of sense to me. Only thing is, you know, when you put something away for long-term storage and you jar it and all this stuff, it sucks to have to check on it to see if the moisture is moving, to open it, open up the, cut the bag, release the seal, open the jar. So I think for me, when I just open a tub and I can kind of say, oh, it's been a few months, and go check some jars and see how moisture is doing, it's great. If moisture is declining at all in long-term storage, maybe the vacuum seal would have fixed that. So who knows? But the worst case scenario for me for a new grower is putting it away too wet and putting it away for long-term, opening it and finding that it's gone bad. You can always rehydrate a little bit, but until you've gotten good at it, you want to avoid putting it away too wet because it can ruin your odors and it can get bacteria and mold. So that's all the questions for FAQ 7 for season 6. As always, thank you so much for being a part of the BuildASoil way, for asking these questions, for watching the videos. If you haven't already, go and just hit the subscribe button. We get blocked, age restricted on most of our videos just because of the content, and it really helps the algorithm. Tell your friends about this stuff. Share these videos. That viralness really helps the algorithm. Even on like Instagram, we don't get new followers unless someone shares something, because they basically just, you know, shadow ban us. So subscribe, like, tell your friends about this. And if you haven't done so already, ask me some questions. Your question might be on here next. I'll see you guys on the next video.